He was the tallest cat around that couldn't play. They said, where you going, that big goon? I said, you call him goon today. But I said, I can tell you, when this guy reached the top, this is going to be the best guy in the neighborhood.
When I was in 3rd grade, I took him to show and tell.
Once he learned to play, he was exceptionally good, so he made All-American.
He blossomed just like a flower, and he went all the way to the top.
He was the most unselfish star I've ever been involved with or seen.
He tries hard in everything, and he doesn't quit.
He's just been a great friend for me for a long, long time now.
He probably more than anybody else at that time made me feel comfortable here.
I'm proud of him.
That's what he reminds me of, was a big hug.
He's just a great guy.
So he's a very humorous person.
He had a depth and dimension about him as a person that many NBA players never achieve, even as they mature in the league.
He's the best brother I think a sister could ever have.
I want to be just like him when I grow up.
He'd give the shirt off his back if he needed to help someone.
It's great that he's been recognized for being a spectacular person.
È una persona positiva per tutta la gente.
He, in my estimation, is one of the finest people I've ever met.
He's a prime example of turn the other cheek.
He's the real deal. He's a gentle giant, is what he is.
The guy's heart is huge. It's huge.
He's determined to be the best at whatever he sets out to do, and he succeeds.
He is probably the most Christ-like person that I have ever known in my life.
This is a great man. This is just a great man.
Hi, I'm Paul James, and I'd like to tell you about a remarkable man named Thurl Bailey whose inspiring story deserves to be told. In 1995, as his long and successful career in the NBA was winding down, Thurl Bailey was offered an exciting contract to play for a professional team in a small town just outside the picturesque city of Como, Italy. Looking back on that decision, Thurl knows now with perfect certainty that the real reason he came to Italy wasn't to play basketball. It was bigger than that, much bigger. For it was in Italy that Thurl, Big T Bailey, finally found what he had been unknowingly searching for his entire life. Thurl was born in Cedar Heights, Maryland, a small burg just outside of the nation's capital. His parents, Carl and Retha Bailey, insisted that their children attend this humble Baptist church each Sunday, where they were taught faith in God and obedience to the Golden Rule. They also instilled within their children a strong work ethic and a desire to always reach for the stars.
I always try to teach my children to make giant steps and see where they lead.
Well, it became evident that Thurl took to heart what he'd been taught by his parents when he first entered junior high school. Federally imposed busing took Thurl from Cedar Heights off to Bladensburg, Maryland, which is a predominantly white community. Well, Thurl's mother, Retha, was concerned how young Thurl would adapt to these new surroundings. That is until he came home from school that day with a surprising announcement.
He said, "Mom, guess what?" I said, "What, Thurl?" He said, "I'm running for president of the student council." I said, "Fantastic." And I said, "You'll probably win too." He said, "Just one thing though. I need you to help me to write a speech." And I said, "Okay, you have to get the English right." I said, "But we'll write that speech tonight, and I'll call in to let the hospital replace me." So I did. And we sat there till 1 o'clock in the morning, so writing a speech.
The next day, Thurl delivered his speech. His gentle way and soft-spoken demeanor won the hearts and the trust of his peers. It was unanimous. He was elected as the first black president in the school's history. And from that day onward, Mrs. Bailey knew that Thurl's reach would always exceed his grasp. Thurl was also the first 6'5" president to ever be elected at Bladensburg Junior High. And his family still remembers how rapidly Thurl grew during those teenage years.
Thurl and I shared the same room, and I hadn't realized really, because it was normality, you know, for me to see Thurl every day, and the growth was kind of happening in a gradual sort of manner. But I realized that Thurl was getting extremely big when I got up in the middle of the night, one night to use the restroom, and I tripped over something in the floor. And lo and behold, it was Thurl's 17 shoe.
He was running, actually. He had to use the bathroom, and he bumped his head up against the top of the hallway and fell back. I think he had grown a few inches, but he didn't realize it.
Then my parents came in the room one night, we were sleeping, and discovered Thurl was sleeping in kind of the fetal position. And so the next morning they asked him, Thurl, why are you sleeping balled up like that? And Thurl says, well, my feet are hanging off the edge of the bed.
With Thurl's phenomenal growth came visions of basketball stardom. That fall, he tried out for the junior high school team. Gangly, uncoordinated Thurl will never forget the day the coaches posted the sheet listing the players that made the team. Thurl's name was not on that list. An inexperienced coach had overlooked his potential. The broken-hearted Thurl hid his disappointment and left the locker room. He crossed the hall and entered the restroom, where he hid in a stall and cried. Well, Thurl came back the following year, and he tried out for the team once again. But once again, he was denied a chance to play. Someone once said that defeat isn't bitter if you don't swallow it. Well, Thurl didn't. It seemed that failure and disappointment only refueled his desire to achieve his dreams. Quit was not a word in the Bailey's family vocabulary. With a calm and yet a passionate determination burning within him, Thurl did everything he could do to get ready to try out for that high school team once again. Thurl at last felt he was ready. Each night after tryouts, he dropped into bed exhausted and fell asleep imagining himself playing on the high school team. Thurl survived the first cut, and then the second. And after the final night of tryouts, the team roster was posted. Thurl spent a sleepless night wondering if his name was on that sheet. Thurl woke early the next morning and hurried to school before anyone else arrived to see if he had made the final cut. Hard work had paid off. Thurl made it, and his aching dream to play basketball had become a reality. But for Thurl, the battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. That year, he would spend most of his time on the bench with very little playing time.
I remember when they used to put him in for the jump ball at school, and they used to take him out, and he didn't play in the game after that.
In spite of this, Thurl didn't give up. He listened to his coaches and worked harder, refusing to let go of the dream that his time to play would come. The man that Thurl ultimately credits for his success in basketball is his high school coach and mentor and good friend Ernie Welch. Of Coach Welch, Thurl says, "I can't thank him enough." Well, it was Welch who first saw the potential in the gangly teenage Thurl.
And in a JV game, now the JV plays preliminary for us, and the varsity goes downstairs at the end of the third quarter to get dressed. But I had been keeping track, and Thurl had 17 block shots in a JV game by the end of the third quarter. Now, I don't know how many he ended up with because I went with the varsity, but I knew then that he was a special talent willing to play defense.
When he finally got his start, he was sensational. He helped make Bladensburg a powerhouse in Metro basketball.
I think the 2 years that I competed against him, I never saw his face. I always see like his chest or one of his big hands swatting my shots away.
And it was shortly after the end of his sophomore year. I called him into my classroom and we had a discussion about where life was going to take him, because he was obviously talented in music. He was a public speaker with a great voice. He was a nice kid. He was a leader. He was a good student, and he was a good athlete. So there's lots of potential doors open for a career. The issue is, where do you want to go? And so we had an hour or two session about, are you going to work over the summer or not? Are you going to go to camp or not? Are you going to go practice or are you going to go swimming? And he decided that he wanted to be great in basketball.
That summer, he worked harder than ever.
At the end of that year, he was starting center for Bladensburg. He came back the following year, made all county. Came back the next year, made all metropolitan. All metropolitan here that's the cream of the cream. That means that you're the best of the 5 players in Washington, Maryland, and Virginia. He made starting center for the all metropolitan team.
He's probably the most unselfish kid that I ever had to coach, because he really was a true high school superstar without trying to be, and without ever worrying about how many points he scored or anything other than, did we win? We had a good program there before he was there and after he was there, but we were great while he was there. So many kids nowadays want to be the man and the show. Thurl didn't have any of that in him. We had kids that felt that way, and Thurl didn't worry about whether they got the credit or what happened. It was a rare athlete that feels that way in that era or this era.
Thurl's desire and work ethic were fast helping him become one of the best big men in the history of the metro area, a basketball hotbed. But this unique desire to always do and always be his best didn't stop short of basketball. No matter what Thurl was involved in, something inside just kept pushing him to be the best he could be in everything that he became involved in. Thurl's mother still recalls attending an award ceremony at Thurl's high school.
We thought nobody else was getting an award. He was out in the audience, and every time it would be Thurl Bailey.
In addition to being the most celebrated basketball player in the school's history, Thurl may also have been the most decorated student-athlete to ever attend Bladensburg High. It boggles the mind to think of all of the activities Thurl participated in. It's even more remarkable how he excelled in all of them. He was a member of the marching band, skillfully playing 3 instruments. He sang and he toured with the Madrigals. He was voted by the student body to be the homecoming prince twice, and then homecoming king his senior year. He was a member of the drama club, and even once donned a dress for a particular role. He was a member of the yearbook staff and the school newspaper, and because of his excellence, received the Journalism Award. His deep baritone voice led him to the Broadcasting Club, where he was the recipient of the award for broadcasting. He was always the president of every club and every organization he belonged to, including being elected the first black president of Bladensburg High School's student body and the captain of the Bladensburg High basketball team. In spite of his incredible schedule, Thurl consistently made the honor roll and won the highest academic award in the county. In addition to all of this, he participated in several service-oriented clubs, the Flag Raising Club and the Cafeteria Club. For all of his effort and his service to his school, his teachers and administrators awarded him with the prestigious Faculty Award.
That even today it is rare, but back then it was even rarer, that he could cross all lines, ethnic, racial, religious, boy, girl. He didn't have a group. He was all groups. And I don't think even as much progress has been made. We still don't have very many people that are acceptable to all groups. And Thurl was. He's got friends on all sides of all groups. And that's, maybe it's just because he's brought up right, or maybe it's just because he's a nice guy, or a fair person, or not selfish. And all those things are part of Thurl. But I think it's having no axe to grind, having no chip on his shoulder, and no hidden agendas. He's just a real, upfront, honest, good guy.
The summer before his senior year, Thurl attended Boys State. His companions at the large gathering took a vote, and they elected Thurl, what else? Governor of Boys State. Even with his demanding schedule, Thurl still found time for those who were most important, his family.
I used to always ask him to take me down to the playground after school to show me some fundamentals. We used to play one-on-one a lot. Sometimes he would let me win, but I wasn't sure. Not only was he a big brother and helped me out with things, he was a good friend too. I was never brushed aside with him. He always made time for me. I think that was one of the things that I like about him.
During Thurl's senior year, he caught the attention of every major college and university in the country. Mrs. Ernie Welch will never forget the year Thurl Bailey was being recruited.
Well, Ernie has had some kids recruited, but never anybody like Thurl. I mean, there were so many schools after him, and when it got down to the end, schools that wanted him were really very aggressive, and that's the only time we've had our phone ringing on. Well, at the time, he wouldn't let them call the home until he had narrowed it down to like 3-5 schools or something. So all the phone calls had to come to our house. And the coaches would call at hours when they knew we would be home, and often that was after we were in bed. And so many of these phone calls would come while we were in bed, but the phone was on my side of the bed. So I would answer it. Ernie would be talking for about a half hour, but the phone was on my stomach with him talking. And after about 4 or 5 of those phone calls, I finally said, we've got to do something about this. It was bad enough we were being interrupted, but then I had to stay awake so I could hang up the phone and put it back. So we actually moved our room around so that he was by the phone and he would be the only one that would be interrupted. And I mean, I'd be woken up, but at least I wasn't having the phone sit on my stomach for a half hour while I talked to these inconsiderate coaches.
At last, it was Coach Norm Sloan of North Carolina State who convinced Thurl to sign with the Wolfpack. Thurl had no idea what an impact this decision would have on the rest of his life. As a freshman, Thurl played frequently, and his future looked bright. In Thurl's second year at State, his destiny was sealed when Jim Valvano was hired head coach, replacing the departing Norm Sloan. Valvano was the right man for the time. His passion for the game, his personality, his love for his players would take NC State and its young players to heights only few could ever dream. Under Valvano, Thurl blossomed rapidly. In 36 games as a senior, he averaged 16.7 points a game and ended his 123-game career with an average of 12.5 points to become the 11th top scorer in Wolfpack history. Thurl's loudest senior statement was his defense. In 3 previous seasons combined, he had blocked 112 shots. In 1982-83, he blocked 95. For all of Thurl's greatness, the play that State fans will remember the most is the double follow shot in the final 4 seconds that carried the Pack past top-ranked UNLV in the second round of the Western Regional Tournament in Corvallis, Oregon. Thurl and the other cardiac kids, as the Wolfpack was nicknamed because of their last-second one-point victories, suddenly, miraculously, found themselves in the championship game against the very talented and favored University of Houston Cougars, led by Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon and Clyde the Glide Drexler. Surprisingly, the Pack got off to a quick start and led at halftime, but midway into the second half, Houston got hot and took a seemingly insurmountable lead. It was just darn lucky for North Carolina State that their biggest fan showed up in Albuquerque to save the day.
The fans for State, they kind of stopped boosting their team at some point during those few minutes because they were losing. And I stood up and I said, "Where's your face?" I said, "That's your team out there playing. Where's your face?" I said, "You make some noise, taking it here, you making noise." About 3 or 4 minutes after, and we won that national championship.
He can tie it up.
The game tied. This is how the game ended.
This is a really interesting strategy by Houston. They're aggressive now. On staying back.
Well, remember, they have a team in there to block anything that goes inside. Down to 14 seconds.
Oh, almost stolen by Drexler. Boy, is he good at that.
They've got to drive to the basket. It's down to 7 seconds.
You can see the time. Whitberg. Oh, it's a long ways.
After the victory, Thurl, overcome with emotion, said with humility, "Some say that God is on our side. I believe he is. I'd like to thank him for us being here, because without him, we wouldn't be." Up until the NCAA championship game, Thurl was the most underrated player in the Atlantic Coast Conference. It took that championship run for most fans and coaches to appreciate the totality of Thurl's skill and determination. The kid who was cut from his junior high school team was now proclaimed by the nation's sports writers and coaches one of the premier college players in the land. He headed perhaps the greatest group of All-Americans ever to be assembled. Thurl had learned from experience and hard work that glory gives herself only to those who dreamed of her. His ultimate dream of becoming a pro was now inevitable. The Utah Jazz showed interest in Thurl, but when it appeared that they would take another player, an inspired Coach Valvano made a call to the Jazz organization. He told them, "Don't look at Thurl just as a player. As a person, he will make your team and your community better." The Jazz wisely listened. They took Thurl in the first round.
From the NCAA championship, North Carolina State team, Thurl Bailey.
In Utah, Thurl had an immediate impact on the Jazz organization. Utah Jazz coach Jerry Sloan will never forget Thurl's most memorable game.
Coach Layton, who was the head coach,
Carl Malone both got kicked out of the game. Me being the assistant coach, I was put in the role of being a head coach in the rest of the game, and obviously we went to Thurl a number of times. He ended up, I think, with 41 or 42 points, and it was a big game for us. It was Denver was in our division, and it was an important game, and he just stepped forward and won the game for us.
During his 8 productive years with the Jazz, Thurl will be remembered as a great player. But ironically, he is remembered most for his small deeds of compassion and love, carried out quietly off the court, far beyond the clamor of the star-spangled arena. Jim Valvano's recommendation proved to be prophetic.
He was just incredible in terms of his willingness to be a part of the community and not have what he did end when he walked off the basketball floor. Now, I think as a team culture, by league standards, I think we're very fortunate with all of our players in terms of willingness to do that kind of stuff, but Thurl really epitomized that. In fact, I think it was in 1987 or 88, he won the J. Walter Kennedy Citizenship Award in the NBA, which is a very high honor for that kind of work, for citizenship within the league. And Thurl has always been a person who's willing to give back. He doesn't just take what the system that he's involved with at the time has to offer and run. He's always willing to put back. One of his very special hallmarks.
Since our family was sponsoring him, Allie decided that she'd like to take a professional basketball player to school for show and tell. So she called and asked him, and he agreed to do it. When we got to the school, the principal had heard he was coming to the class, and so he decided to turn it into an assembly for all the students. And so Thurl came in, and he went up and he was introduced by the principal. And then he started speaking, and he spoke for a long, long time to children, trying to get them to be motivated to do well in school, do the things they should be doing. And then when he concluded, he called my daughter Allie out of the audience, and she came up, and he picked her up, lifted her up, and gave her a kiss, and said, "The reason I'm here is because Allie asked me to come to school for show and tell." And I thought that was quite an experience for a third grader. And she has never forgotten that particular day.
He called me up and invited me up there, gave me a kiss on my cheek, and I mean, you just feel like, he made me feel like a star.
I was working on my sod, and I ran out of sod, and I needed more sod, and I barely knew Thurl. He had just moved in next door. He was kind enough to come over and introduce himself, and I was stuck. I needed a pickup, and Thurl has this big, beautiful black pickup, and it took me a little while, but I got up the guts, and I asked him to borrow it. So I went and loaded up a couple of pallets of sod, and I had to stop short, and of course both these pallets slid into the bed of the pickup, just destroyed the pickup. Brought it back. I was like a little kid coming in to tell his parents, and knocked on the door and said, "Thurl, I hurt your pickup." He didn't even pause. He just said, "That's okay." I said, "No, Thurl, I don't think you understand. I destroyed your pickup. I smashed your kid." And he said, "That's all right. Thurl, you got all that expensive stereo equipment. I ruined your pickup." He said, "Are you all right?" Right then I knew that, possessions don't mean anything to Thurl. People are what count to him. He came out, looked at the pickup, laughed, and that was it.
And Thurl was always the one that came out very, very late, but when he came out, he always took care of all the, whoever wanted an autograph or was there to talk to him, he would talk to him. And I remember going out there one night, and there was a young boy there, and he was in his probably early teens. And we began talking, and I didn't know why he was there, but as the players kind of kept going, and he was still there, I asked him who he was there to see, and he said Thurl Bailey. And I said to him, "Well, how did you know Thurl?" And he says, well, he just went on about his accolades, how, being a superstar and being, the jazz player. But he kind of went on and talked about him, how he kind of had been good to him and had been kind to him. And so as we continued on, I could see he was all alone, and I knew the hour was getting late, and I said, how are you going to get home? And asked him where he lived, and he said he lived up north. And I told him, explained to him, you know, Thurl lives clear south of the valley. And he says, that's all right, Thurl will see that I'm taken home. He said, I remember we were all walking out to the car, and this young man was with us, and Thurl had presented him with a pair of big sneakers that he had signed his name and everything. And this kid hadn't kind of thrown over his shoulders.
Hey, Thurl, I appreciate the ride home. Thanks for the shoes, man.
And I've often thought back on this young boy, because he was killed in the Gulf War. And the opportunities and the things and the fun times that we had at the games. And through those years, and they were very short, we got to know him too, and he was a nice young man. And I think Thurl, it definitely had an impact on his life. Thurl is a man that always seized opportunities, that he knew that life oftentimes didn't give second chances.
Just at a time when Thurl was trying to cope with a disappointing divorce, he received news that he was to be traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves. He would have to leave behind his 2 sons and the people that he had learned to love and who had learned to love him.
You know, it was a very difficult thing for me when when we had to trade Thurl Bailey. That was probably the most difficult thing that I've done as far as coaching, because of respect that I had for him when he was here, and the kind of person he was as far as the team concerned. He always was trying to do the right thing as far as what we wanted to do on the floor, and I thought he would handle himself as a professional when he was off the floor, and probably as well as anybody would be around.
Owner Larry Miller still recalls with tender feelings the day that he and Thurl bid one another goodbye.
And I remember the first time I saw him after the trade was made, which was just a couple hours. And I had his, we give to people in our organization a really nice gold ring that has 3 rubies, and at 10 years we change it to 3 diamonds. And it has their hire date and their initials on the sides of it, a little bit like a Super Bowl ring or something, but it's on a smaller scale. But it's a nice ring. And the ones we give to the Jazz players have the Jazz logo on them instead of the group logo. And I thought that I wanted to give that to Thurl, because he passed 5 years before he left, and we hadn't had an opportunity at our annual awards dinner to do that. So I went up to him with this, what was obviously a ring box in my hand, and he was standing there just next to me, and I put my arm around him. And I opened it, and I said, I want you to have this before you go. He didn't want the situation to be any heavier than it already was, or needed to be, and he just kind of put his arm around me, and he said, I know how you feel. I hate leaving as much as you hate to see me go. But one of the things about friends is they can understand a lot of each other's feelings without having to fully express them. So this is something where a decision's been made. I accept it. I'll hope that the Jazz go forward better than they were without me, and that my career will blossom and flower from where it is. And he really handled it in a very magnanimous way and a mature way that I guess kind of in a sense took me off the hook, because I was feeling pretty guilty about that.
When Thurl got traded to Minnesota and came back here, there's a number of players that have been traded or left the team and gone to other teams. I can't remember any other player getting a standing ovation when he walked on that court. And I'm not talking about when they introduced him. I'm talking about when he came on for shoot-around. And again when they introduced him, and again when they mentioned his name, regardless of the fact that he was adversarial to the Jazz because he was now on the Timberwolves. He was getting that same recognition, not just because he played here for so long, but because of the type of person he was, because of his community service. The guy's incredible.
After season's end, Thurl left Minnesota and returned to his home in Utah to run his successful Thurl Big T Bailey basketball team.
Wake up. How you guys doing? Doing good? You guys ready for camp? Okay.
It was at this camp that Thurl met the lovely Cindy Southwick of Richfield, Utah, the older sister of one of his camp's counselors. The two became close friends, fell in love, and then married for time. Today, Thurl and Cindy have a daughter, Brielle, and are expecting their second child. Cindy, the daughter of a Mormon bishop, had a strong testimony of the restored gospel and was impressed with Thurl's spirituality and how much he knew about her church and the scriptures. After his third and final year with the Timberwolves, Thurl spent a year in Europe playing ball for a professional team in Greece, and then returned with Cindy to their newly built home in Salt Lake City. And then one night, he received a call that would literally change the course of his life, and of Cindy's life, forever. A team called Polti, Cantu, Italy, wanted Thurl to come and play for them. Thurl had 24 hours to decide. Thurl felt prompted to take the offer. Within hours, he was packed and on a plane heading for the Malpensa airport in Milan, Italy. In Italy, Thurl immediately became an integral part of the Polti team. He was adored by the Italians, who affectionately nicknamed him the Thurlminator. But even though the people of Italy loved Thurl, he felt very much alone. He couldn't communicate with anyone because he couldn't speak their language. So while he waited for Cindy and Brielle to join him on the other side of the world, he spent much of his time alone, walking, sightseeing, and thinking. Looking back, Thurl believes that the main reason that he went to Italy was to think. He began to assess his own life. By worldly standards, it had been a slam dunk. He'd had a long and fruitful career in the NBA. He was married to a beautiful girl and had 3 incredible children that he loved more than anything. He was happy, but not content. Something was wrong. His entire life, he had seized every moment and every opportunity. But now there was this unwanted, empty, nagging feeling inside, whispering to him that there was something else he needed to grasp to continue to progress the way he always had. As Thurl pondered this thought, another entered his mind and persisted until he acted upon it.
Hey guys, how you doing? Come on in.
I could tell they were a little intimidated when we first got together. I think one of the missionaries was brand new. He was really quiet. The other one, he was really talkative. And we sat down and we talked, and I had some questions that I needed answered that they basically couldn't answer.
The missionaries returned to the mission home where they spoke with their mission president, President Clegg. President Clegg agreed to go with the missionaries to visit Thurl.
When I opened the door and saw these 2 missionaries standing there, and the president was standing behind them, and they were coming in, and I shook his hand. The feeling that I got when I met this man in my doorway was very, very strong. I mean, it was powerful. And I knew at that point in time that this was a special man and that he was going to answer all the questions that I had. The interesting thing is a man that stands about 5 foot, I don't know how tall he is, 5'8", 5'9", and he intimidated me. You know, here I stand 6'11". Not many people intimidate me. You know, but this man did from the very first time that I saw him. And he had this, it wasn't really an intimidating look or anything like that, but it was the feeling that I had when I shook his hand. You know, it was like I'm in the presence of a very special individual, and I better know that, you know, and it's like he wasn't telling me that, but, you know, somebody was.
And I understand perfectly what happened that night. I had the Spirit with me. And as a missionary, you try to do that. You want to have the Holy Ghost with you when you deal with people. I just happened to be there. I was a passenger on the train, and I'm grateful to be that passenger. I'm grateful to be part of that. But he felt the Spirit. I felt the Spirit. The missionaries felt the Spirit. And when you feel the Spirit of the Lord, that can change your life, and it changed his life. He's a good man because he's honest enough to recognize it. He's honest enough to accept it. A lot of people can feel the Spirit and not accept what they know to be true, but he felt it, and he has integrity, so he accepted what he felt.
There was just a strong, strong spirit in that room, you know, and I think about it now and I realize how strong it was then. I couldn't help it. My eyes watered. I looked at him, and his eyes were watering. And at that point, that night, without telling them, you know, I knew the direction I was going, you know, and I knew that I would be a member of the church. And it wasn't something I had to think about for a long time. You know, so I called my wife.
My grandmother had passed away, and so I had flown back to the States from Italy to attend the funeral. And I was sitting in my hotel room, just getting ready to go to the funeral. I was all dressed. The phone rang. And I knew it was him calling. I was waiting for a phone call from him. He didn't have to say anything. I said, "Thurl, are you okay?" And he just cried. He didn't say a word. And I said, "Thurl, are you okay?" And he still didn't answer me. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was, "I'm getting baptized."
And then at that point, she started to cry. And there was really no talking going on. There was a bunch of crying on both ends of the phone.
And I knew it was coming, but I was shocked. And he told me what a wonderful experience he'd had with President Clegg, and he knew now what was missing in his life.
From an early age, Thurl had always been taught to take giant steps. This would be the biggest, the most important step of his life. When special pants were tailor-made and a font large enough to accommodate Thurl was found, a date was set for the baptism. He asked Cindy's father, John Southwick, to come to Italy and perform the ordinance.
As I know, as Thurl went into the waters of baptism, and as he came forth, he had a greater mission, that his life was beginning again. What mission this is, I don't know. But I know that our Father in heaven has a great mission for him to perform in this life. Not only of a father, but of a greater calling in being able to deal with people in the world and proclaiming the gospel to other people and to be a leader and use the talent he's been blessed with as a member of the church.
I remember when he came out of the waters of baptism. I was standing to the side holding Brielle, and Cindy was standing by me, and the look that he gave Cindy and the look that he gave Brielle, was a look of, we can finally do this. We can finally be an eternal family now, which is what I know he wants more than anything. And with tears running down Cindy's face and my face and Thurl's face and a smile on his face is a picture I'll never get out of my mind. It was beautiful.
It was the most spiritual meeting I think that I've ever attended. And to see somebody that you love, that you want to be with for eternity, to see him actually be baptized and become a member of the church and know that he knows that the church is true is the most wonderful thing you could ever want.
I know that my baptism and my repentance of my sins, I know what that meant. It meant that I was forgiven for all those things that I had done. You know, and I was starting a new life. You know, and I was one step closer to seeing Heavenly Father.
Thurl will never forget Italy, where he played a prominent role in helping Poldi to the coveted Italian championship. But most of all, he'll remember Italy because it was there that he learned what the future and beyond has in store for him and his family. I wonder if, after his baptism, now his greatest victory, I wonder if Thurl said to himself, "Some say God is on my side. I believe he is. Well, I'd like to thank him for being here because without him, I wouldn't be." If Thurl didn't say that, I'm sure he thought it.
There's time for everything. You know, for some maybe it's early, and for some maybe it's later. For some it'll be too late. But my time is now. And I've grabbed a hold of that opportunity. You know, and there's no way I could let it slip by me. You know, it's too much riding on it. You know, it's not easy when you have forces working against you. You have Satan working against you. You know, and that's why you have to study the doctrine, and that's why you have to, as they say, don't just talk the talk, but walk the walk. It's exciting. You know, it's exciting. It's exciting when I think about being sealed to my wife. You know, it's just exciting when I think about going through the temple. You know, and holding Brielle and seeing her in white and seeing my wife. And it's the truth. You know, and it's right there in front. It's plain and simple. Yeah, it took me this long. It took me 8 years in Utah and to decide to leave the country. But it was time then. That was the time. And now I've got to go on. I've got to go forward.
And he has sent me here, has given me an earthly So my needs are great. Help me to understand His will before it grows too late. Lead me, guide me, walk beside me, help me find a way. Teach me all that I must do to live with Him someday. I am a child of God, rich blessings are in store. If I but learn to do His will, I'll live with Him once more. Lead me, guide me, walk beside me, help me find a way. Teach me all that I must do to live with Him someday. Teach me all that I must do to live with Him someday.